He wasn't born special. No silver spoon, no powerful last name, no safety net. Just a small room, thin walls, and dreams that felt too big for his reality. From the very beginning, life made one thing clear to him. Nothing would be easy. While other kids talked about what they wanted to become, he was busy thinking about how to survive. Every morning began with an alarm that felt heavier than his body, a mirror that reminded him of everything he didn't have, and a world outside that didn't care whether he showed up or not. People around him had plans. He had pressure. Pressure to earn early, pressure to grow up fast, pressure to accept a life he never chose. Slowly, without realizing it, he started believing the lie that this was all he was meant for. School didn't feel like opportunity. It felt like proof that he was always behind. Teachers didn't expect much. Friends laughed at his goals. Relatives told him to be realistic. And in their world, realistic meant stay small, stay quiet, don't dream too loud. But deep inside him, something refused to die. A voice, quiet at first, weak, almost scared. Yet it kept asking the same question again and again. What if this isn't the end of my story? At night, when the world went silent, when failures replayed in his mind, when fear sat beside him like an old friend, that question wouldn't leave. What if pain was preparation? What if struggle was training? What if being underestimated was an advantage? He didn't have answers. He only had hunger. Hunger to prove, not to them, but to himself. Because greatness never comes from comfort. It comes from being pushed into corners where quitting feels logical. And this was only the beginning. Because before success becomes visible, there is always a season where no one believes in you. That season had just begun. Life didn't hit him all at once. It hit him slowly, every single day. In small moments, in quiet humiliations, in words people didn't even realize were destroying him. You should lower your expectations. People like us don't get those opportunities. Be thankful for what you have. Those sentences followed him everywhere. At work, he was invisible. He worked harder than most, spoke less than all, and still got noticed the least. When mistakes happened, his name came first. When success happened, his name was forgotten. He learned early that effort doesn't always bring recognition. Sometimes it only brings exhaustion. Every paycheck disappeared before the month ended. Bills didn't care about motivation. Responsibilities didn't care about dreams. There were days he skipped meals not because he wanted to be disciplined, but because he had no choice. And still, the world expected him to smile. Social media made it worse. He watched people his age traveling, celebrating, winning, while he calculated groceries and counted coins. Comparison became a silent enemy. He started asking himself questions he was afraid to answer. Why them and not me? What am I missing? Am I just not good enough? The hardest part wasn't being broke, it was feeling replaceable. Like if he disappeared, nothing would change. One night, after a long shift, he sat alone in silence. No music, no phone, just his thoughts. And for the first time, he admitted the truth to himself. I'm tired. Not tired of work, tired of hope without results, tired of effort without progress, tired of believing in a future that kept pushing itself further away. Quitting felt reasonable. Giving up felt mature. Accepting less felt safe. And that's when he realized something dangerous. The world doesn't break you by force. It convinces you to surrender willingly. It tells you to be realistic, to stop fighting, to stop dreaming, because dreams make people uncomfortable, especially when those dreams come from someone they already counted out. That night, he stood in front of the mirror for a long time. He didn't see a winner. He didn't see a hero. He saw someone who had been surviving for too long and living for too little. And he asked himself one final question. If nothing changes, will I be okay living this same life 5 years from now? That answer hit him harder than any failure ever had. No. That answer scared him more than struggle ever could, because struggle meant there was still a chance. That night didn't change his life. There was no miracle, no sudden success, but something shifted. For the first time, he stopped waiting to be saved. He understood a brutal truth. No one was coming. And strangely, that realization gave him power, because if no one was coming, then the responsibility was finally his. And responsibility, once accepted, becomes strength. This wasn't the moment he won. This was the moment he stopped losing himself. And from this point on, every step forward would be earned the hard way, in silence, in discipline, in patience. Because when life tells you that you're not enough, you have two choices: believe it, or decide that this story isn't finished yet. And he decided to keep going, even if no one was watching.
Change didn't arrive loudly. It didn't come with motivation speeches or dramatic moments. It started quietly, with a decision no one else knew about. He stopped talking about his plans, stopped explaining his pain, stopped asking for validation, because he realized something simple and painful. People listen when you win. Before that, they only judge. So he went silent. Mornings became earlier, nights became longer. While the world slept, he worked. Not because he was inspired, but because he was tired of staying the same. Progress was slow, painfully slow. Some days it felt like nothing was changing at all. His body ached, his mind fought back. Doubt didn't disappear, it just got quieter. He failed often. He tried things he wasn't good at, made mistakes he couldn't hide, watched small hopes collapse again and again. And still, he showed up the next day. Not confident, not fearless, just committed. There were moments when old voices returned. This isn't working. You're wasting your time. Go back to what's safe. And safety looked tempting. Safety meant no disappointment, no risk, no embarrassment. But it also meant no growth. So he chose discomfort. He chose to be bad at something long enough to get better. Every small action became a brick, not impressive alone, but powerful together. He started learning when others were relaxing, practicing when others were complaining, building when others were scrolling. No one clapped, no one noticed, and that was the point. Because real transformation happens when nobody is watching. Slowly, almost invisibly, something changed. His posture, his focus, his standards. He stopped expecting quick results, stopped chasing motivation. He learned discipline. Discipline doesn't care how you feel, it only cares if you show up. And discipline began shaping him into someone he barely recognized. Not louder, not arrogant, stronger, quieter, more controlled. The world still treated him the same, still underestimated him, still ignored his effort. But internally, the balance had shifted. He wasn't waiting anymore. He was preparing. Because he understood a truth most people learn too late. You don't rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your habits. And his habits were changing him. This wasn't success yet. This was the construction phase. The part no one posts, the part no one celebrates. But without this part, nothing that comes next matters. Because before the breakthrough, there is always a season of becoming. And he was becoming someone dangerous to his old limits. Quietly, relentlessly. The more he changed, the more uncomfortable the world became. Not because he was loud, not because he was successful, but because he was no longer predictable. People are comfortable when you stay the same, when you play the role they assigned you. And he had stopped playing.
Old friends noticed the distance. Conversations felt different. Jokes didn't land the same way. He wasn't better than them. He was just moving in a different direction. And that was enough to make them uneasy. Some people questioned him. Others mocked him. "You've changed. You think you're special now? Relax, life isn't that serious." They said it casually, but it carried weight, because criticism sounds loudest when you're alone. There were nights he questioned himself. Am I becoming someone I don't recognize? Is this discipline or obsession? Is this growth or ego? But deep down, he knew the answer. This wasn't ego. Ego wants attention. This was focus. Focus doesn't ask for permission. He started losing people, not through arguments, not through drama, through distance. Different priorities create silent goodbyes, and those goodbyes hurt more than loud endings. There were moments he missed his old life, the comfort, the laughter, the simplicity, but he also remembered the frustration, the helplessness, the feeling of being stuck, and he understood something painful but necessary. You can't build a new life using the same patterns that ruined the old one. Growth demands separation from habits, from environments, from people who benefit from you staying small. This was the part nobody warned him about. Self-improvement can feel lonely, very lonely. There were days he wanted to slow down, to explain himself, to be understood. But he learned another truth. People don't need explanations, they need results. So he kept going, not aggressively, not emotionally, consistently. The world still didn't reward him, success still felt far away, but something inside him was solid now, unshakable. He wasn't chasing approval anymore. He was building alignment. Alignment between who he was and who he wanted to become. And alignment creates peace even when the path is hard. This wasn't the chapter where he gained something. This was the chapter where he let go of comfort, of familiarity, of the version of himself that felt safe but small. Because sometimes the real sacrifice isn't money or time, it's people. And accepting that truth is what separates those who change their lives from those who only talk about it. He didn't know how long this road would be. He just knew one thing. Turning back was no longer an option. Pain stopped feeling like an enemy. It became a signal, a reminder that he was stretching beyond who he used to be. Pain stopped feeling like an enemy. It became a signal, a reminder that he was stretching beyond who he used to be. The days blurred together. Work, practice, learning, repeat. There was no excitement in the routine, no applause, no reassurance, just effort. And effort without immediate reward can break people. But something inside him had hardened, not in a bitter way, in a disciplined way. He stopped asking when things would change, stopped counting days, stopped measuring progress emotionally. He learned to trust the process, even when the process felt empty. There were moments when exhaustion took over. His body wanted rest, his mind wanted escape. And in those moments, old habits tried to return. Distractions, comfort, excuses. But he saw them clearly now. They weren't relief, they were traps. Traps designed to keep him familiar with struggle, but addicted to comfort. So he made a quiet decision. Pain would no longer be wasted. Every failure became feedback. Every setback became information. Every hard day became proof that he was still moving. He began refining instead of restarting, adjusting instead of quitting. Most people quit because they think they're doing it wrong. He learned that doing it wrong was part of doing it right. Confidence started forming differently, not from results, from resilience. He trusted himself more, not because life got easier, but because he knew he wouldn't run when it got hard. That trust changed everything. He stood differently, spoke less,
observed more. He stopped reacting emotionally because emotional reactions drain energy, energy he needed for progress. People around him still didn't see the change, and that no longer bothered him. He wasn't building a moment, he was building a foundation. Foundations are invisible, but they carry everything. There were nights he fell asleep unsure, not about his effort, but about the outcome. And that was okay, because for the first time, his identity wasn't tied to winning. It was tied to becoming. Becoming consistent, becoming reliable, becoming someone who finishes what he starts. And that identity was stronger than motivation. This was the chapter where pain turned into fuel, not loud fuel, quiet fuel, the kind that burns slowly and lasts long. He wasn't close to the finish, but he was far from the beginning, and that distance mattered. Because once you've walked far enough away from who you used to be, going back feels impossible, and he had walked too far to turn around now. Discipline stopped feeling forced. It became automatic, not because it was easy, but because it was familiar. The alarm rang and he moved. No negotiation, no debate. He didn't wait to feel ready. He didn't wait to feel motivated. He understood something most people never do. Motivation is a visitor. Discipline is a resident, and residents don't ask for permission. His days were structured now. Time had value. Energy had direction. He stopped doing things that didn't move him forward, not because they were bad, but because they were unnecessary. He protected his focus the way poor people protect money, carefully, intentionally, without apology. Distractions still existed, they always will, but they no longer controlled him. He chose his habits the same way people choose their future, deliberately. Slowly, the internal noise faded. Anxiety decreased, confusion settled, self-doubt weakened. Not because problems disappeared, but because his response to them matured. He didn't panic when things went wrong. He adjusted. That ability alone put him ahead of most people, because chaos doesn't defeat people. Emotional reactions do. There was a quiet victory in this phase. No announcement, no recognition, just a deep sense of control. For the first time, his own system he trusted more than his emotions, and that trust created calm. Even on hard days, especially on hard days. People still underestimated him, but now their opinions bounced off. He wasn't trying to prove anything. Proof comes later. This phase was about mastery. Mastery of time, mastery of attention, mastery of self. And self-mastery changes the way you walk into rooms. Not louder, more grounded. He knew he was still far from where he wanted to be, but he also knew something important. He was no longer the kind of person who gives up. That identity shift mattered more than money, more than success, more than recognition. Because once you become disciplined, results are just a matter of time. And time, when combined with discipline, is unstoppable. This wasn't the chapter where the world noticed him. This was the chapter where he became dangerous to his excuses. And from this point forward, quitting would feel unnatural because discipline had replaced desire. And discipline doesn't break under pressure. It grows stronger. Rejection didn't come as a surprise. It came as a test. He applied. He asked. He showed up. And again, the answer was no. Sometimes politely, sometimes silently, sometimes not at all. No response can hurt more than a clear rejection, because silence makes you question your worth. He did everything right, prepared more, improved his skills, stayed consistent. Still, doors stayed closed. And this is where most people break. Not because they aren't capable, but because rejection feels personal. It feels like the world is saying, you're not chosen. Old doubts tried to resurface. Maybe they were right about me. Maybe I waited too long. Maybe this isn't meant to happen. But something was different now. He didn't collapse under those thoughts. He observed them.
He had learned not to confuse feedback with identity. A rejection is information, not a verdict. So he adjusted, improved where he could, learned where he lacked, strengthened what he controlled. And when rejection came again, it hurt less. Not because he cared less, but because he believed in himself more. He understood another hard truth. Rejection is often protection. Protection from paths that don't align with who you're becoming. The right opportunity doesn't rush you. It meets you when you're ready. This phase was exhausting, emotionally more than physically, because effort without acceptance feels lonely. But loneliness no longer scared him. He had been alone before, and he survived. He stopped announcing his attempts, stopped expecting encouragement. He worked quietly and let rejection sharpen him. Each no refined his standards. Each closed door clarified his direction. While others took rejection as a sign to quit, he took it as proof that he was still in the game. You don't get rejected if you're not trying. And he was trying, relentlessly. There was no bitterness in him, only patience. Because patience is confidence in slow motion. He knew something was coming, not because he felt lucky, but because he had done the work. And work eventually demands recognition, even if it arrives late. This chapter didn't give him results. It gave him resilience. And resilience is what carries you through the longest delays. Because the strongest people aren't the ones who never get rejected. They're the ones who don't stop after rejection. And he wasn't stopping. Not now. Not anymore. This was the phase where quitting made sense. Not emotionally, logically. Nothing was working fast enough. Nothing was paying off yet. From the outside, his life looked the same. Same routine, same struggles, same distance from success. The only difference was internal. And internal progress is invisible, which makes it easy to doubt. There were mornings he stared at the ceiling longer than usual, not because he was lazy, but because he was tired of pushing without proof, tired of trusting a process that refused to show results. This is the danger zone, where discipline meets disappointment, where people say, "I gave it my best," when in reality they just got tired of waiting. He asked himself hard questions. How long am I supposed to keep going like this? What if this effort never turns into anything? What if I'm sacrificing years for nothing? Those questions didn't make him weak, they made him human. And for a moment, quitting felt peaceful. No more pressure, no more self-expectations, no more silent battles, just acceptance. Acceptance is comfortable, and comfort is seductive. But then he remembered something. Every version of his past self that chose comfort ended up in regret. Temporary relief always led back to permanent frustration. So instead of quitting everything, he did something smarter. He paused emotionally. Not the work, not the discipline, just the expectations. He stopped demanding outcomes from every effort, stopped asking life to prove itself, and focused on execution alone. One task at a time, one day at a time. No future fantasies, no worst-case scenarios, just presence. That shift changed everything. The pressure lifted, the anxiety softened. He wasn't chasing success anymore. He was honoring commitment. And commitment doesn't panic. Commitment shows up even when hope is tired. This phase humbled him, not because he failed, but because he learned he wasn't entitled to results. Results are earned slowly, quietly, relentlessly. He accepted that struggle was part of the contract. And once accepted, struggle lost its power. It was no longer a threat. It was a companion. This was the moment most people never see. The moment right before progress. Because progress rarely announces itself. It waits until you're almost convinced it's not coming.
and he didn't know it yet, but something was shifting behind the scenes. The foundation was settling, the timing was aligning, and the work he thought was invisible was about to be noticed. Not by everyone, but by the one opportunity that would matter. He stayed when leaving would have been easier, and that decision quietly separated him from the majority. Because winners aren't the ones who never want to quit, they're the ones who don't.
Results didn't arrive with celebration. They came quietly. So quietly that at first he almost missed them. A small opportunity, a slight shift in response, a door that didn't close immediately. Nothing dramatic, but different. And different was enough. For the first time in a long while, effort was met with movement, not success. Movement. Someone replied. Someone listened. Someone gave him a chance. It wasn't big. It wasn't life-changing, but it was real. And real progress hits deeper than imagined success because it proves that the path works. Confidence didn't explode. It stabilized. He didn't celebrate. He didn't relax. He leaned in because small wins are fragile. They grow only when protected. He treated the opportunity with respect, prepared more than required, showed up earlier than expected, delivered more than promised. Not to impress, to honor the work he had already put in. There was no fear this time, only focus. He had been training for this moment without knowing it. The long nights, the discipline, the rejection, all of it sharpened him. And now, under pressure, he didn't fold. He performed. Mistakes still happened, but they didn't shake him, because pressure reveals preparation. And he was prepared. The world still didn't clap. Most people didn't notice, but internally, something locked into place. Belief. Not blind belief. Earned belief. The kind that comes from evidence, from seeing effort connect to outcome. This changed how he carried himself. Not proudly, calmly. He wasn't chasing anymore. He was attracting. Because consistency creates gravity. Opportunities move toward those who stay ready. This wasn't the breakthrough. This was confirmation. Confirmation that he wasn't delusional, that patience wasn't wasted, that discipline wasn't for nothing. The gap between who he was and who he wanted to be had narrowed. Not completely, but noticeably. And that was dangerous. Because once you see proof, quitting becomes impossible. He still had a long way to go. Bigger challenges, higher expectations, less margin for error. But now he had something powerful, momentum. And momentum doesn't care how long you struggled. The effort began to pay back, not loudly, but consistently. And consistency compounds, quietly, relentlessly. This time, the win was visible, not to everyone, but enough. People started noticing small changes, not the struggle, the results, a better outcome, a clear improvement, a sign that something was working. The same people who once overlooked him now paid a little attention. Nothing dramatic, just curiosity. And curiosity is the first step toward respect. He didn't react, didn't explain his journey, didn't tell his story. Results speak better than memories. He stayed grounded, because early success is dangerous. It can make you forget what built you. He remembered the nights no one saw, the effort no one praised, the days that felt pointless. That memory kept him disciplined. The win didn't change his routine. It validated it. He doubled down, because progress isn't maintained by celebration. It's maintained by consistency. Pressure increased. Expectations grew. People now watched more closely. And attention comes with weight. But he was ready, not because he felt confident, because he was prepared. He didn't chase perfection. He chased reliability, doing the work well again and again. That's what separated him now. Others showed up when it felt good. He showed up because it was scheduled.
The win didn't solve his life. Problems still existed. Stress still came. But something fundamental had changed. He trusted himself under pressure. And that trust is rare. People started asking questions. How did you do it? What changed? He kept his answers simple. I didn't stop. Because the truth didn't need decoration. The gap between effort and reward had finally shortened. Not closed, but closer. And that changed his energy. He moved with calm urgency. Focused. Intentional. He wasn't rushing. He wasn't waiting. He was executing. This phase didn't make him arrogant. It made him careful. Because once you've earned something, you understand how easily it can be lost. So he protected what he built. Not with fear, with discipline. This wasn't the peak. It was proof of direction. And direction, once confirmed, becomes dangerous. Because now he knew. If he kept going, there was no limit. Only time.
Recognition came quietly at first, a name mentioned in rooms he wasn't in, respect in tones that used to carry doubt. People didn't apologize for underestimating him, they simply adjusted their behavior, and that told him everything. Attention increased, so did pressure, because once people notice you, they expect consistency, not potential, performance. And performance doesn't care about your past, it only cares about now. He felt the weight, the fear of slipping, the fear of disappointing, the fear of losing what took so long to build. But fear didn't control him, it sharpened him. He remembered the days when nobody expected anything. Back then, he was invisible. Now, eyes were watching. And strangely, that didn't intimidate him, because pressure is lighter when you've already survived worse. He didn't change his pace, didn't rush to impress, didn't slow down to protect comfort. He stayed steady, because steadiness builds trust, and trust opens doors faster than talent. Opportunities grew. Not massive ones, but meaningful ones, the kind that test reliability, the kind that expose character. He treated every chance like it could be the last, not out of fear, out of respect. Mistakes still happened, but now they were handled differently. No excuses, no blame, only accountability. And accountability earns respect faster than perfection. People noticed that too. They started relying on him, depending on him. And reliance is dangerous, because once people rely on you, your standard must rise. He felt the responsibility, and instead of resisting it, he embraced it. Responsibility isn't a burden, it's proof that you're trusted. This phase changed how he saw himself, not as someone trying to prove worth, but as someone expected to deliver value. That shift was powerful. He wasn't chasing validation anymore, he was maintaining excellence. And excellence demands sacrifice, less comfort, less flexibility, less room for error. But he was ready, because discipline had already trained him for this. This wasn't fame, this wasn't victory, this was positioning. Positioning for something bigger, something heavier, something that would test not just his skills, but his character. And he could feel it. The next phase wouldn't be about growth, it would be about endurance. By the time people started calling him consistent, he had already moved past that identity. Consistency was no longer something he tried to maintain, it was who he was. He didn't wake up chasing success, he woke up honoring standards, and standards don't fluctuate with mood, they stay. He had learned the difference between motivation and responsibility. Motivation feels good, responsibility feels heavy, and heavy things build strong people. The pressure never left, it just changed shape. Now it wasn't about proving himself, it was about protecting what he had built. Because building something is hard, but maintaining it requires character. He led quietly, not with commands, not with noise, with example. People around him started adjusting without being told. They showed up on time, they prepared better, they took things seriously. Because leadership isn't about authority, it's about influence, and influence comes from consistency over time. He still remembered where he came from, the doubt, the invisibility, the long nights that felt endless. Those memories kept him grounded. Success didn't make him loud, it made him calm, because confidence earned slowly doesn't need to announce itself. He understood now that winning wasn't a moment, it was a mindset built on discipline, patience, and self-respect. There was no dramatic ending, no final applause, just a man who kept showing up long after quitting stopped being an option. And that was the real victory. Not money, not recognition, not status, but control. Control over his time, control over his effort, control over who he chose to become. He wasn't unstoppable because life became easy. He was unstoppable because difficulty no longer stopped him. And that's the truth most people miss. Success doesn't change you. It reveals who you've been becoming all along. He didn't win because he was special. He won because he stayed. When it was boring, when it was painful, when it made no sense. And that's why this story ends here. Not because the journey is over, but because from this point on, the direction is clear. Forward. Always forward.